Alrighty, hi guys. Welcome to my video frequency calculations, what they mean and how we find them. A lot of students this week often struggle with frequency calculations. So I figured I would try to put together this little video in the hopes that in explaining what they mean, where we get these numbers, and then how to calculate them. It'll help you understand the concept deeper, why it's important first off, what these numbers mean, and then how to actually solve the problems on your homework and stuff like that. So let me pull up the homework here quick. Okay, here's your homework assignment for this week. This video is particularly talking about this last section here, which is math, which throws a lot of people off. It throws me off too. So hopefully this video can help explain it. What we're talking about with these frequency calculations is basically we're trying to calculate the odds of finding an individual that looks or that matches a DNA sequence in a population at random. The reason why we care is if we're at a crime scene or if we've collected a DNA sample from a crime scene, and I'm trying to tell the judge that this DNA sample belongs to this bad guy, the judge is going to want to know what are the chances that this DNA sample possibly belongs to somebody else. Like, yes, it matches this bad guy, but what are the chances that it could match somebody else? So that's our odds, or that's what our goal is here, is we're trying to calculate what are the chances that another person in the universe has this same DNA sequence here. Because if that number's high, like if you have a 60% chance of finding another person that matches that DNA, that's not really enough to convict a bad guy because half the country could be the bad guy. So we want to use the math to narrow down just how likely is it that the bad guy is the bad guy, and the smaller the number, the better. So we've got these three levels of frequencies. Each one gets more and more precise in the hopes that we'll be able to get a number small enough that it's convincing enough to the judge. So the first one, the high or the least distinctive, is allele frequency. Now, first off, let's start with the term frequency. A term frequency in genetics means the odds of an individual selected at random from a population possessing a certain attribute, such as an allele combo, etc. This number is often expressed as a decimal number. Okay, so basically what we're doing when we're asking frequency, when we're asking about a frequency, is what are the odds of finding a person in the population that matches this particular criteria in the population. So for allele frequency, an allele frequency is the odds of an individual selected at random from a population possessing at least one copy of a certain allele at a given locus. So if you remember from your study this week, a locus is simply a location on a chromosome. It's a particular address, you might say, where some short tandem repeats are usually found. And different numbers of short tandem repeats can be found at the same location on different chromosomes. So like my chromosome 2 could have different short tandem repeats on one of its loci than my wife's. Same location on her chromosome 2. And because this is junk DNA, we're able to get more variation in between individuals, and that's why we use junk DNA with these short tandem repeats to help tell individuals apart, rather than genes where you only have one or two possible options, or maybe just a few. Like you could have brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes, kind of thing, and it's like, great, so does a third of the world. So that's why we use junk DNA. So the allele frequencies in this class will never make you calculate an allele frequency. We'll always give them to you in a table that looks like this. But I find it helpful to understand where these numbers come from so that you can know and understand how allele frequencies work. So what I've done is put together a little scenario. It's a simplified scenario, but it'll show you the concept so that you can understand where an allele frequency comes from, where we get these decimal numbers, what they mean, so that you can be able to apply that understanding better in solving these problems and on your exam. So here's my little scenario. Let's pretend that the population is me and my 4 neighbors, Peter, James, John, and Paul. We're all very righteous people. At least those 4 are, maybe not me, but, and we're at this, and at this particular locus that I just totally made up, it turns out there are only 2 possible alleles, which would never happen in real life, but I'm simplifying things here. There's only 2 possible alleles. You can either have a 4 repeat allele or a 5 repeat allele. So we get our DNA tested, and it turns out I have a 4 and a 5. Peter has a 4 and a 5. James has a 4 and a 4. John has a 4 and a 4. And Paul has a 5 and a 5. So I took those and I separated them out here so that we could see them more individually. So there's my 4 and my 5. All right. Okay. So in order to find the allele frequency of a certain allele, some scientist has to go through and take samples of like a bajillion people. In our case, we only took it from 5 people, but they take it from a lot of people, and test to see which alleles they have at that particular locus, kind of like I did here. And then we count to see how many alleles there are total in the population. So we've got 5 people in my population. Each one has 2 alleles. So there are 10 total alleles in the population. If we were sampling 10,000 people, then there would be 20,000 total alleles because every person would have 2 at that locus. Does that make sense? So in my situation, we have 10 alleles in the population. Now, to figure out the frequency of a 4, let's go through and count how often does a 4 happen in the population. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 out of 10 of the alleles in the population are 4. So we go 6 divided by 10. 6 divided by 10, because that's 6 4s out of 10 total alleles, gives us a 0.6 chance of finding a 4 in the population, which is 60%. That's the allele frequency of 4. So notice mine is still a decimal number. Mine is a lot bigger than theirs are over here. That's simply because my population size is tiny and I only have 2 options in my little practice experiment, whereas these guys have like 6. So that's why their decimal numbers are smaller, but it's the same idea. Somebody went and sampled like 10,000 people and counted up how many 10 alleles there were in the 20,000 alleles in the sample and divided it by 20,000 alleles. And to that, we got that decimal number for you. That's where that number comes from. The allele frequency for 5 can be found the same way. You count all of the 5s. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, 5 alleles in the out of 10 gives us an allele frequency of 0.4. So that's where the allele frequencies come from, is some scientists that had way too much time on their hands sampled a bunch of people, counted up the total number of alleles, and then counted up all of the times that a certain allele happens in the population and divided it by the total number of alleles and got a decimal number. Now notice 0.6 plus 0.4 is 1. That's because 100% of the alleles in this case are either a 4 or a 5. Over here, if you add up vertically down the columns, you'll find they add up to 1 as well, which is 100%. So that's how you find an allele, or that's where the allele frequency numbers come from. Again, you'll never have to calculate an allele frequency in this class because you couldn't. We'd have to make you count the alleles of 10,000 people, which is a complete waste of your time. So we let the scientists do that for you. Instead, we just tell you their results. We give you a little table like this, which is helpful for the bigger, more precise calculations later on. But I wanted you to be able to understand where these allele frequencies are coming from. This is saying that there is a 5.6% chance that if I grab a random person off the street a Caucasian in the US, if I grab a random Caucasian in the US off the street, there's a 5.6% chance that they will have at least 110 allele. That's what that means. There is a 32% chance that they will have at least 111 allele. So the 11 is more common in the population than the 10 allele, which is more common than the 8 allele, if that makes sense. That's what these numbers mean. Okay, now let's go to the next level of specificity here. The next level up is locus frequency. Now, what a locus frequency is looking for is what are the odds of finding my specific combination of alleles at this locus in the population. So for me, my allele combination at locus P12 is 4, 5. So to find my locus frequency for P12 is to say how many people in the population have a 4, 5 combo. So now, rather than counting all 10 alleles, we now have 5 pairs, if that makes sense. So how many pairs are there that are 4, 5? There's 1, there's 2. And there's a total of 5 pairs, right? Because there are 5 people. So my locus frequency, counted locus frequency for this population, the locus frequency of a 4, 5 allele, or of a 4, 5 locus combo is equal to, it's going to be 2 out of 5, because 2 out of 5 of the combos were a 4, 5 combo. And 2 out of 5 as a decimal is 0.4. Okay. If I were to take the locus frequency for Paul's combo is a 5, 5. So his locus frequency counted is going to be, let's count how many 5, 5s there are. It looks like he's the only one. So 1 out of 5. So his locus frequency for his combo is 0.2. Does that make sense? Because 1 out of 5, 1 divided by 5 is 0.2. Again, your locus frequencies, when you calculate them, are going to be much smaller numbers than this because your population size is much bigger and you have more than 2 options of alleles. So don't freak out if your numbers are really small. They're supposed to be really small. This is just for my example. The numbers are going to be kind of weird because my population size is much smaller than you would ever find. Okay. Well, it turns out that we don't, similar to how it would be a waste of time to have you count the count an allele frequency, it would be a waste of time to have you count a locus frequency. True, for a population of 5 people, it didn't take me very long. But for a population of 10,000 people, going through and counting all of the 4 or 5 locus or allele combos would take an outrageous amount of time, which you don't have. So some scientist, some mathematician figured out a little formula that that helps us predict what the counted locus frequency would be for a particular population based on our allele frequency table. It's not perfect, but especially with bigger populations, much bigger than 5, it's going to be so close that it's worth just banking on that one. So here's the formula. In class or on the homework, it tells you to use 2 different formulas. It says use P squared or 2PQ. Personally, I find it very difficult to keep track of when you're supposed to use which one. So I like to simplify it into one formula. So this is my little master formula. A times P times Q is equal to locus frequency, where the P is equal to the allele frequency of the first allele in the combo. Q is equal to the allele frequency of the second allele in the combo. And A is the number of different alleles in the combo. So number of different alleles in the combo. Let me show you what that means. For Paul, if we were going to calculate the locus frequency for Paul, Paul has one kind of allele. Both of them are 5. So there's only one different kind of allele in the combo. So his A is going to be 1. So to calculate his locus frequency, we are going to, so this is locus frequency of a 5-5 combo, because we were calculating it for Paul. His formula would be 1, because he only has one kind of allele in his combo. Both of them are 5s, so that's one type of allele. So A is 1 times the allele frequency of the first allele in the combo, because that's P. So we have to go to our allele frequency table over here. And it says for the allele 5, the allele frequency is 0.4. So I'm going to put 0.4 in here for P. And then the Q is the allele frequency of the second allele in the combo, which also happens to be a 5 in this case. So we would put in a 0.4 here. So his locus frequency is going to be calculated by doing 1 times 0.4 times 0.4. And if you do that, that comes out to be 1 times 0.4 times 0.4 comes out to be 0.16. So the equation tells us that Paul's locus frequency for the P12 locus is going to be 0.16. Now notice, that's not exactly spot on to what we counted it would be. We counted he would be at 0.2 as opposed to 0.16. That's 20% as opposed to 16%. But notice, especially for having such a ridiculously small population size, that's pretty close. That's a pretty good guess right there. So the formula worked for him. Now let's use it to calculate my locus frequency and see how close it gets. So the locus frequency of 4-5, of a 4-5 combo, what would A be? A is the number of different alleles in the combo. I have 2 different alleles. I have a 4 and a 5. Those are 2 different ones. So A is 2 for my 4-5 combo. Does that make sense? Where Paul, both of his were the same, so A was 1. For me, both of my alleles are different, so A is 2. Okay. Times the allele frequency of the first allele, because that's what P is. And my first allele is 4, so that's 0.6, 0.6. Times the allele Q, which is the allele frequency of the second allele in the combo. So my second allele is a 5, so the allele frequency is 0.4. And if we do that, that comes out to be 2 times 0.6 times 0.4 is equal to 0.48. Now, notice this one's a little further off than my other one, but that's just because of my really small population size. 0.48, given that we only had 5 people, 0.48 is really close to 0.4. So again, it accurately predicted, or it relatively accurately predicted what the locus frequency was, which is good enough for us. So we use the formula instead of counting 10,000 people's combinations just to save time, because the formula can actually get us pretty close to what we would really find if we counted them. So that's why we use the formula. Now, just in case you're panicking that I broke the rules and didn't use P squared and 2PQ, let me show you why you shouldn't be worried about using A times P times Q instead of 2PQ and P squared. your homework says use 2pq if the alleles are different. So where P is the allele frequency of the first allele and Q is the allele frequency of the second allele. Well, 2 times P times Q if they're different. Well, isn't that exactly what my formula is? If the alleles are different, then A would be 2, right? Because there's 2 different kinds of alleles. So A would be 2 times P times Q. That's exactly what the formula in your homework is. Then the other formula, it says over here, and then use P squared if the alleles are the same. Well, if the alleles are the same, like Paul's, 5, 5, then that would mean A is 1, and P and Q are going to be the same number because both alleles are the same. So P and Q are exactly the same number, right? They were both 0.4, which means P is the same thing as Q in this particular case. So they just say P times P or P squared. So 1 times P is P squared. That's exactly what my formula says. So if you memorize just this one formula here, A times P times Q is equal to locus frequency, and you can remember what each of those 3 things are, you won't have to worry about remembering which formula to use in what circumstance, because the formula applies to every circumstance. Plus, it's easier to remember one formula rather than 2 and not get them mixed up, because a lot of people sometimes accidentally do like 2p squared or something like that. So if you use A times P times Q, it'll make it a lot less confusing and you won't get trapped as often. Okay, that's how you calculate a locus frequency. So all we're asking you to do over here on the homework for calculating the locus frequency for D7S820 for Maggie Mortis, on one of these earlier questions, you used a gel to figure out Maggie Mortis's allele combo. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but you would find her 2 numbers over here, and then you would we're looking for the D7S820 locus, so make sure you use the correct column here, because one of the big mistakes people use is they use the allele frequencies from the wrong column. So make sure you're pulling the allele frequencies from the right column here. So so you will look in the D7S820 column, find her 2 alleles, and then use A times P times Q with these numbers being used as P and Q to calculate what her locus frequency is. That's all we're asking you to do right here. And you should come out with a really small decimal number. Okay. The final level of specificity is profile frequency, because if you look over here, and again, your locus frequency numbers will be much smaller than mine are, because A, you have more variables, but there are more alleles, and B, you have more people in the population that's being sampled. But notice, even with this, 16% of the world's population could potentially match my bad guy at this point, right? If I'm the guy on trial, the math says that there's a 16% chance that someone else in the world could also be the bad guy. That's a pretty big number still. That's still millions upon millions of people that could potentially be my bad guy. And I want to try and narrow that down a little further if I'm going to persuade the judge. So we take it one step further and we go to profile frequency. A profile frequency is what are the odds that a random person in the population will match my allele combo on more than one locus simultaneously. So what I'm asking here, but before I was saying, with the allele frequency, I was saying, what are the odds that someone else will have a 4? Locus frequency was saying, what are the odds that someone else will have a 4-5 at P12? Profile frequency is saying, if I look at a few more loci here, what are the odds that I find another person in the population that has a 4-5 at P12, a 5-5 at D9, and a 5-5 at NK177? If the person has 2 out of 3 of them, they don't count. So the profile frequency is saying, what are the odds I find another person like me? Okay, because now notice the odds are this is going to be a really small number, because what are the chances that I'm going to find a random person that matches me on all 3 loci, right? That's what we're doing with profile frequency. So to calculate a profile frequency, all you have to do is take the locus, you have to find the locus frequencies for each of the combinations, each of my combinations at each of the 3 loci, and multiply them together. So it's going to be, so in this case, they gave us 3 different loci. So to calculate my profile frequency in this sample is going to be, so it's going to be locus frequency 1 times locus frequency 2 times locus frequency 3 is equal to profile frequency, where locus frequency 1 is the locus frequency of P12, locus frequency 2 is the locus frequency of D9, and locus frequency 3 is the locus frequency of NK177. Okay, so let's calculate it for me using my little example. In my example, I've got a 4-5 combo at P12. So we have to find the locus frequency of my P12 one, and I have a 4-5 combo there. So we use A times P times Q. Because the 2 alleles are different, I've got to have A is going to be 2. It's going to be 2 times P, the allele frequency of having a 4 at P12. So notice, make sure you look in the correct column here. I don't want to accidentally pull an allele frequency from a different column. Make sure you're looking in the right column here. So this is for P12. So I'm looking for the odds of having a 4 at P12, which is 0.6, 0.6, times the odds of having my second allele, which is a 5, at P12. So that's going to be 0.4. And that is going to equal 2 times 0.6 times 0.4, 0.48, which is what we calculated earlier. Now let's look at, or now we have to calculate the locus frequency of D9. Now for me, I have a 5-5 combo at D9. So we use A times P times Q because this is a locus frequency. So A, both of my alleles are the same. They're both 5s. So the number of different alleles in the combo, A is going to be 1. A is going to be 1 because both of my numbers are 5s. So A is 1 times the allele frequency of getting a 5 at D9. So we're going to be in this column this time, not that column, because we're talking about D9. So the odds of getting a 5 in D9, which in this case is 0.6, times the odds of getting a 5 at D9, because my second allele is a 5. So that's going to be another 0.6. And that is going to equal 1 times 0.6 times 0.6 is equal to 0.36. There's my locus frequency for D9. Now we have to find the third locus frequency, the locus frequency of NK. So the locus frequency of NK, I have a 5-5 combo at NK. So now we're in this far right column here. We're calculating the locus frequency. So we're going to use A times P times Q. A, because both of my alleles are the same, A is going to be 1. And then P is the allele frequency of the first allele in the combo. So it's the odds of having a 5 at NK177, which is 0.5. Times the odds of having my second allele, which is also a 5, which is 0.5 according to my allele frequency table. So this one is going to be equal to 1 times 0.5 times 0.5, equal to 0.25. Okay, so I found my 3 locus frequencies, each one for each of the different loci. Now to find the profile frequency of me, I have to multiply these 3 together. So the profile frequency is going to be this number times this number times that number. And there's my profile frequency. Notice that is a freaking small number, even for my really small population size and having only 2 alleles. That's a really small number. Yours will have tons of zeros. Like, you'll come out with tons of zeros. You'll find that there is a really, really, really small chance of catching the bad guy. This is saying that even in my population of 5 people, there's a 4% chance of finding another person that matches me. Your number is going to be way, 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 way smaller because there are more allele options and there are more, and there are way more people in the population. But that's where those numbers come from, and that's what they mean. This is saying that there's a 4% chance of finding another person like me or another person that matches me at these 3 loci in the population. Now, the guys that are the FBI, the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation, when they capture bad guys, they collect DNA, they collect locus information, what alleles they have, for 20 different loci. And they store it in a database called CODIS, C-O-D-I-S. So if I catch a bad guy, I'm able to, if I get a DNA sample that matches this guy on all 20 loci, you could calculate the profile frequency for that. It's going to be ostentatiously small. I've calculated it before, actually, and it comes out to being a number so small that the odds of finding another, that basically you have the chance of finding another person's big toe in the entire world, all 7 billion people. Basically, someone's big toe could match you in their DNA. So that shows that you're super duper unique with your DNA, and that shows just how powerful these calculations can be. So that's that's frequency calculations. If you have any questions, please reach out to me or your teacher or your TA. You can set up a tutoring appointment with me. I'm happy to help. And yeah, hopefully this video is helpful and not too jumbled or confusing. Good luck, guys.